This is the best team based on the data the players have shown on the pitch in the first 6 game weeks of the Premier League. And in this video, I'll explain why. I'm Sakafusi, a data analyst, and I've built a model that analyzes and presents all the data you need to know for Fantasy Premier League. Based on team performances so far in the first 6 game weeks of the Premier League, we can use the powerful data of expected goals to predict how many clean sheets Premier League teams are likely to keep in the future if they continue performing at the same level. In this table, you can see that from game week 7 to game week 13, that is, over the next 7 matches, Arsenal are expected to keep 2.42 clean sheets, making them the best defense in the league so far. Using expected goals data, we can also predict how many goals teams are likely to score in the next 7 game weeks. By comparing these expected goals with the goals they've already scored, we can identify whether a team has an easy or difficult run of fixtures ahead. At the top of the table we find Liverpool, with a coefficient of 1.07. This means that in the next 7 matches, Liverpool are expected to score around 7% more goals compared to their current average, as they have the easiest schedule. On the other end of the list, Fulham sit at the bottom with 0.93, since they are expected to score about 7% fewer goals compared to their current average. So, let's take a look at how Premier League goalkeepers have been performing so far. On the x-axis, we've got saves per 90 minutes. Basically, the further to the right a goalkeeper is, the more saves he's making. And right at the far end, as you can see on the chart, is Burnley's Dubravka, averaging 4 saves every 90 minutes. Now, on the y-axis, we've got expected goals conceded. The lower a keeper is on this chart, the fewer goals he's expected to concede, which of course means a better chance of keeping a clean sheet. And sitting right at the bottom is Arsenal's Raya, with about 0.65 expected goals conceded per match across the first 6 game weeks. If goalkeepers keep performing at the same level, then Raya is expected to be the best goalkeeper going forward, with 4.44 expected points per match from now on. In this chart, we can see the 20 best Premier League defenders so far. The defenders marked with a green dot are those with the highest defensive contributions per 90 minutes on average. On the x-axis, we have expected goals and expected assists per 90. The further to the right a player is, the higher his chances of scoring or assisting. Furthest to the right is Timber, with 0.45 expected goals or assists per 90 minutes. On the y-axis, we have the expected goals conceded by their teams. The lower a defender appears, the higher the likelihood that his team will keep a clean sheet. And here, at the very bottom, we find Newcastle's Schär. If defenders keep performing at the same level for the rest of the season, then the best defender is Arsenal's Timber, with 7.43 expected points per 90 minutes. We also see Senesi from Bournemouth ranking very high in expected points, mainly because, as shown in the table, he averages 13.5 defensive contributions per 90 minutes. And Bournemouth's defense hasn't been bad in the opening fixtures either, conceding just 0.91 expected goals per match on average. Some other budget-friendly options include Fulham's Anderson and Sunderland's Mukiele. Even though Anderson is priced at only 4.5 million and Mukiele at 4.0, both show very high numbers in defensive contributions, which makes them quite attractive picks for our backline if we're looking for a cheap defender. In this chart, we can see the 20 best midfielders in the Premier League so far. The further to the right a player is, the higher his expected goals per 90 minutes based on the minutes he has played. Furthest to the right is Gruda, but since he hasn't played many minutes yet, it's better to ignore him. Beyond that, the standout attacking player right now is Crystal Palace's Ismaila Sarr, with just over 0.7 expected goals per 90 minutes, and he's comfortably first in this category. Also ranking very high are Gordon, Enzo, Semenyo, and Anthony from Bentley. The players shown in bold text here are the ones who also take penalties for their teams. Since this chart excludes penalties from the expected goals calculation, it's important to keep in mind that penalties are another reason to consider these players for our FPL squads. For example, Gordon, Enzo Fernandez, and Semenyo are not only strong in expected goals per match, but they're also their team's penalty takers. On the other axis, the y-axis, we have expected assists per 90 minutes. At the very top we see Chelsea's Estevao and Everton's Grealish. Just like with defenders, the players marked with a green dot are midfielders with high defensive contributions per 90 minutes, meaning they also have a better chance of picking up bonus points from defensive actions. Notably, Bruno Fernandes of Manchester United and Everton's Ndiaye stand out here, since both combine high defensive contributions with penalty-taking duties and a bit of threat from open play. If midfielders keep performing at the same level for the rest of the season, then the best one is Crystal Palace's Ismaila Sarr, with 7.21 expected points per match. The main reason his projection is so high is the 0.72 expected goals per 90 minutes he has produced so far in the Premier League. Also very high on the list is Chelsea's Enzo Fernandez, who has 0.45 expected goals from open play, while also being the team's penalty taker as long as Palmer is injured. Next is Bournemouth's Semenyo, with 0.37 expected goals per 90 minutes. He is likely, though not with 100% certainty, to be the team's penalty taker. What remains unclear is whether, if Kluivert is also on the pitch, the penalties will go to Semenyo or to Kluivert. Further up the projections we also see Manchester United's Bruno Fernandes, who adds a bit of open play threat with 0.2 expected goals and 0.17 expected assists per 90 minutes. On top of that, he averages 10.9 defensive contributions per 90 and remains United's penalty taker. Right after him is Ndiaye, for very similar reasons. He takes penalties and also posts strong defensive contribution numbers. Finally, we see Bentley's Anthony, who so far has been the best budget midfielder in the league. With 0.37 expected goals per 90 minutes, his attacking output looks excellent for his price. Now let's take a look at the forwards. In this chart, the further to the right a player is, the higher his expected goals so far in the league. As you can see, Haaland is way out on the far right. He's in a category of his own, with a massive gap between him and the rest. Haaland averages almost 1.4 expected goals per 90 minutes, while the next closest is Wood with 0.5. At this point, Haaland is simply in a league of his own, and it would be crazy not to have him in your team. If we leave Haaland aside, we see that most forwards don't differ too much from each other right now. Among those who stand out are Nottingham Forest's Wood and Crystal Palace's Mateta, since they not only post relatively high expected goal numbers but are also the penalty takers for their teams. If forwards keep performing at the same level for the rest of the season, then the best striker is of course Haaland, with 10.28 expected points per 90 minutes. This number comes from his 1.32 expected goals per 90 so far, combined with the fact that he is Manchester City's penalty taker. Next is Crystal Palace's Mateta, with 5.78 expected points, coming from his 0.48 expected goals per 90 minutes and his role as Palace's penalty taker. Before we decide on our own strategy, let's first take a look at the most popular transfers Fantasy Premier League managers have made this week, starting with the most popular sales. Number 1 is Mohamed Salah of Liverpool. Even though he's the most expensive player in the game, he hasn't really shown it on the pitch so far. His numbers are very low, and naturally, managers are slowly starting to move him on in order to free up funds to buy Haaland or other players. Other popular sales include Chelsea's João Pedro, who despite being in a lot of teams hasn't really delivered in recent game weeks. His numbers are concerningly low. Next is Nottingham Forest's Wood, who this season, unlike last year, looks to be struggling to find the back of the net. Following him is Chelsea's Chalobah, who was sent off, meaning he's suspended for the next match, which explains why many managers chose to sell him. And right after we see Cucurella, also from Chelsea. In fact, 3 Chelsea players appear among the top sales. Now, Chelsea haven't been doing well recently, but in truth, managers might be overreacting by selling all of them at once. As our stats have shown, Chelsea are actually slightly above average so far, and both Cucurella and Chalobah have fairly decent underlying numbers. And since they're defenders, it may not be the wisest use of transfers to move them out, because midfielders and forwards usually have a much higher ceiling. Now let's look at the most popular buys of the week. Starting from the bottom, in 5th place we see Gabriel. Since there have been many sales of defenders, it makes sense to also see a lot of defensive signings. Alongside Gabriel, the list also includes Guehi from Crystal Palace and Senesi from Bournemouth. Gabriel is a nailed-on centre-back for Arsenal. And since Arsenal currently have the best defense in the league, he's got a very strong chance of keeping clean sheets, making him a logical choice for our backline. On the other hand, Senesi has shown very high expected points according to our model, largely due to his excellent averages in defensive contributions, and given his price, he's a very logical and affordable pick. Guehi, by comparison, doesn't look as good. If we compare him to Senesi, who is in a similar price range, the difference is striking. Guehi averages 7.83 defensive contributions per 90, while Senesi averages 13.5. That's a massive gap. Defensively, Bournemouth have also looked better, conceding just 0.91 expected goals per match compared to Palace's 1.14. Neither of them offers much attacking threat, but between the two, Senesi is clearly the better option. If we also look at the fixture difficulty table, Bournemouth rank 5th, with 1.82 expected clean sheets over the next 7 matches, while Palace are much lower at 1.43. Outside of defenders, another very popular buy this week is Bournemouth Semenyo. Everyone knows he's had a fantastic start, scoring several goals. Our model also shows him as the third best midfielder for expected points, with 0.37 expected goals per 90 minutes, and potentially being his team's penalty taker as well. But of course, the most popular transfer by far is Erling Haaland of Manchester City, and that's perfectly logical. As we saw in the forwards table, he is by a huge margin the player with the most expected points in the game. So, after looking in detail at all the stats that can help us predict player points in Fantasy Premier League, let's now see what our model believes is the best possible team we can build with this data. In goal, it has selected Raya and Dubravka. Raya is chosen because Arsenal have the best defense in the league, while Dubravka is the cheapest starting goalkeeper available. For our defense, we've got Calafiori and Timber from Arsenal. That means, together with Raya, we have 3 Arsenal defenders, and since Arsenal's defense is the strongest right now, it makes perfect sense to invest in them. Next we have Senesi from Bournemouth, who, as we already discussed, is a fantastic option at his price thanks to his very high average in defensive contributions. We also include Schär from Newcastle, since Newcastle's defensive numbers have been excellent so far, and Schär is close to bonus points for defensive contributions, though not quite at Senesi's level. And finally, our 5th defender is Mukiel from Sunderland, who costs only 4.0 million, is a nailed starter, and has an excellent average in defensive contributions per 90 minutes. In midfield, we've selected Bournemouth Semenyo, Crystal Palace's Sarr, Everton's Ndiaye, Manchester United's Bruno Fernandes, and Chelsea's Enzo Fernandez. As we've already said, Semenyo and Sarr are among the most threatening midfielders in the league so far and have scored multiple goals. Ndiaye and Bruno Fernandes both combine high defensive contributions with penalty-taking duties, while Enzo brings everything together. He's Chelsea's penalty taker while Palmer is out, and he also has strong attacking threat based on his expected goals. Up front, the attacking trio starts of course with Haaland, by far the best player in the league right now. Alongside him, we have Mateta, who posts fairly solid, though not outstanding, expected goal numbers per 90, and is also Palace's penalty taker. And completing the trio is Richarlison. To be honest, this is not a pick I'm particularly proud of, but unfortunately at the moment there's a real lack of strong forward options, which forces us to settle on Richarlison of Tottenham. Finally, let me show you a team with a clever little twist compared to the one our model originally suggested, a change that I believe could make the difference, because it might just help us stay one step ahead of the competition. The team you see on your screen is almost identical to the previous one, with just a single change. Instead of Richarlison in attack, we've gone for Liverpool's Isak. The reason is simple, the team's main striker so far this season has picked up an injury, which means Isak is almost certain to start the next game for Liverpool. And we already know from previous seasons that he's a very capable forward. Playing as a starter in a side as strong as Liverpool, there's a very good chance he'll deliver attacking returns. Of course, to fund this move, since Isak is much more expensive than Richarlison, we had to make one more adjustment. We sold Bruno Fernandes and replaced him with Burnley's Anthony. The reason we sold Fernandes is that, among our midfield 5, he wasn't the best performer but he was the most expensive, which gave him the weakest value for money. Swapping him out for Anthony makes sense, as Anthony is the exact opposite, the best value for money midfielder in the league so far. For his price, he has posted outstanding numbers in both his underlying expected goals and in real output, having scored multiple goals, including one against Manchester City last game week. This team, I believe, is almost impossible to go wrong with. It includes the best performing players based on the data so far, and it might just be the recipe for success. So tell me, which of the two teams do you prefer, and would you change anything? Leave a like if you've made it this far, because if you're still watching, you've definitely enjoyed it, and it always makes me happy to see your support. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to drop them in the comments. And of course, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next videos. Thanks a lot for watching, good luck with your teams, and may you get plenty of green arrows.